Imagine being 14 years old and already running multi-million-dollar businesses while your peers are still struggling with homework. Marshall Pike's name might be unknown to you, but this boy achieved things that most adults are incapable of in their entire lives. He doesn't come from a super-rich family, didn't inherit anything, yet he embarked on building a business empire that defies all logic. But Marshall Pike's story isn't just about success. Something much deeper, much more puzzling lies in the background, leaving even experts baffled. Marshall Pike was born 20 to 30 years ago in an average middle-class family in California. His father was a mechanic, his mother an elementary school teacher. Nothing suggested that this child would ever stand out from the crowd. In fact, in his early years, Marshall was an expressly quiet, withdrawn child who preferred playing alone rather than with his peers. But when Marshall turned 11, something changed. Not gradually, but almost overnight. According to his parents, he woke up one Monday morning and started asking questions that even they couldn't answer. We're not talking about why is the sky blue, but about how financial markets work, what cryptocurrency means, and how to sell a product in a way that makes people want even more of it. When Marshall turned 12, something happened that changed their entire family's life. One Sunday afternoon, he announced to his parents that he was going to start his first business. Naturally, his parents smiled at this. After all, which 12-year-old doesn't dream of being a businessman? But Marshall wasn't dreaming. 3 weeks later, his first venture was already running, an online platform where he sold used electronic devices. Not just any way. He applied marketing strategies that many only learn at university level. Personalized offers, psychological pricing, and what's most shocking, it worked. At the end of the first month, Marshall earned $3,500, a 12-year-old child. $3,500 in 1 month. If Marshall's story ended here, that would already be incredible. But this was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, Marshall's revenues grew exponentially. Not linearly, as one would expect from a beginning entrepreneur, but at a pace that surprised even experienced investors. But here begins the real mystery of the story. Marshall was never on social media. He didn't follow entrepreneurship channels. He didn't read business books. When his parents asked him where he knew these things from, Marshall always gave the same answer: I just know. He just knows. A 12-year-old child just knows how to build multi-million-dollar businesses. When Marshall's story began spreading in local business circles, experts started taking interest in him. Dr. Sarah Richardson, a professor at UCLA's business school who has been researching entrepreneurial psychology for 30 years, met with Marshall personally. "I've never encountered anything like this," said Dr. Richardson after the meeting. "This child has business instincts that usually develop after decades of experience, but he didn't learn these. He simply possesses them." During the meeting, Marshall outlined strategic plans that, according to Dr. Richardson's estimates, could build even $100 million ventures. At 13 years old. By the time Marshall was 14, he was already running 3 different businesses simultaneously. Besides online trading, he launched a consulting company for young entrepreneurs and a technology startup that helped small companies develop marketing strategies using artificial intelligence. But then something happened that questioned everything. One March evening, Marshall's mother, Linda Pike, called Dr. Richardson. She was crying on the phone. "Something's wrong with Marshall," she said. "Tonight he said things that a 14-year-old shouldn't know." Dr. Richardson visited the Pike family the next day. What she experienced there, she still can't explain. According to Dr. Richardson's report, Marshall was sitting at the living room table that evening, surrounded by papers, doing something he called quantum business planning. He saw connections between financial markets, consumer psychology, and technological trends that even the biggest Wall Street analysts have difficulty understanding, Dr. Richardson wrote in her observation notes. But what was truly shocking was that these connections proved to be correct. Marshall predicted market changes that occurred exactly 3 weeks later. He foretold which technology stocks would rise the next month, and he was right in every case. But the most shocking thing was when Marshall started talking about business strategies that, according to Dr. Richardson, the biggest consulting firms haven't even dreamed of yet. Marshall's story soon reached local media, then larger news agencies. Interview requests flooded in, investors sought out the family, and offers arrived that adult entrepreneurs don't receive in their entire lives. But then Marshall Pike and his family made an unexpected decision. They withdrew from public attention. "We don't want media attention," Linda Pike stated in her last interview. "Marshall is special, but he's still a child, and every child has the right to remain a child." The last reliable information about Marshall dates back 2 years. He was already 16 then, and allegedly no longer actively involved in his business ventures. The companies he previously led continued operating, but through automated systems he had built himself. But here's the biggest mystery. Those automated systems that Marshall built when he was 13 to 14 years old are still working. Moreover, they continue to develop, learn, and generate new business opportunities. A child created artificial intelligence systems that the biggest technology companies spend billions of dollars trying to achieve. Dr. Richardson and several other experts tried to solve Marshall Pike's mystery. Various theories emerged. The first theory suggests Marshall is a so-called savant, someone who possesses extraordinary abilities in a specific area. Some are brilliant in music, others in mathematics by nature. In Marshall's case, this area would be business strategy and understanding financial markets. The second theory is even more interesting. According to Dr. Michael Santos, a professor of cognitive sciences at Stanford University, Marshall possesses intuitive abilities that allow him to process and connect information at a subconscious level that other people can't analyze even consciously. Imagine Marshall's brain as a supercomputer, capable of recognizing patterns and finding connections that are invisible to others, explained Dr. Santos. The third theory is perhaps the least scientific but most interesting. Dr. Lisa Chen, who researches consciousness states, hypothesizes that Marshall can enter some kind of special mental state when making business decisions. There are reports that Marshall says and does things in business situations that he doesn't remember precisely later, said Dr. Chen. This might suggest that some subconscious process takes control, which is much more intelligent than his conscious mind. This certainly sounds the least believable, but there are cases in Marshall's story that might support this theory. Several people personally met Marshall at the peak of his business career. These encounters all show remarkably similar patterns. James Morrison, an investor who participated in one of Marshall's presentations, described his experience. Marshall started talking about his business, and sometime in the middle of the presentation, he simply transformed. His voice remained the same, but the words he spoke were so deep and complex, as if someone else was speaking through him. He outlined business strategies I'd never heard before, and each one was brilliant. Sarah Kim, a marketing expert, shared similar experiences. At first, I saw a completely normal 14-year-old child, quiet, somewhat shy. Then he started talking about business, and it was like they'd switched him out. He spoke so confidently and expertly as if he had 30 years of experience behind him. Marshall's extraordinary abilities changed not only him, but his entire family. Linda Pike, Marshall's mother, spoke in an interview about what it was like living with a child who, at 14, was already earning more than both of them combined. "At first we were proud," Linda said. "Who wouldn't be proud that their child is so successful? But then we increasingly began to worry." Marshall no longer behaved like other children. He didn't play with his friends, wasn't interested in teenage things. Only business occupied his mind. The father, Robert Pike, also commented similarly. "At one point we realized that Marshall was no longer our little boy. Someone else had taken his place. Someone much older, much more experienced, and much more distant from us than a child should be." Marshall's social relationships were also extremely unusual. He could never really connect with his peers. Not because he was arrogant or condescending, but simply because he was occupied with things that other 14-year-olds didn't understand. However, he developed deep conversations with adults who had been working in the business world for decades. These people often spoke about Marshall as if he were their colleague, not a child. Marshall never behaved as if he were a child when we talked about business topics, Dr. Richardson recalled. He asked questions and made suggestions that only someone who had been in this world for decades could make. At one point, Marshall's parents decided to subject their son to professional psychological examinations. They wanted to find out what was happening with Marshall and whether this was normal. Dr. Patricia Williams, a child psychologist, conducted the examinations. The results deepened the mystery even further. "Marshall's IQ falls within the normal range," said Dr. Williams. "He's not a genius, not exceptionally gifted in the traditional sense. But when we conducted business simulations with him, he achieved results that even university MBA students can't produce." According to the examinations, Marshall's personality was also dual. In everyday life, he was withdrawn, quiet, and often uncertain. But as soon as they started talking about business topics, he transformed. Confident, decisive, and making decisions that experts agreed with. One of Marshall's most shocking achievements was the artificial intelligence system he developed at 14 years old. This system had capabilities that even the biggest technology companies couldn't achieve at that time. The system could predict market trends, optimize marketing campaigns, and generate business strategies that proved successful in every case. But what's strangest is that Marshall never learned programming. One day he sat in front of his computer and started coding, Linda Pike recounted. When we asked him how he knew this, he said he just knew. He didn't learn it, didn't look it up anywhere. He simply knew. If you want to better understand the secrets of successful entrepreneurs and similar inspiring stories, subscribe to the channel and don't miss the upcoming videos either. Marshall's businesses weren't just successful locally. The systems and strategies he developed had effects that were felt internationally. Several Fortune 500 companies contacted the Pike family to purchase licenses for Marshall's systems. The offers were in the tens of millions of dollars range, from a 14-year-old child. But Marshall and his family rejected every offer. Not for money, not for recognition, but for a very special reason. "I don't want others to use my ideas for bad purposes," Marshall said in one of his rare interviews. This statement is perhaps the most revealing about Marshall's character. At 14, he already possessed the kind of responsibility that we would only expect from the most mature adults. He knew that the systems he developed could have enormous influence on people's lives, and he took this responsibility seriously. According to Dr. Richardson, this is one of the most convincing pieces of evidence that Marshall is truly special. It's not just that he has extraordinary business abilities. It's also about how wisely he handles these abilities. This is something that many adults still don't know how to do. Before Marshall completely withdrew from public attention, there were signs that something was changing. Those who were close to him said he increasingly talked about being tired. Marshall said he saw and felt things that other people don't, Sarah Kim recounted. He talked about too much information flowing through him and not knowing how to turn it off. This suggests that Marshall's extraordinary abilities might not have been just a gift for him, but also a burden. Today, when Marshall Pike's name comes up in business circles, people continue to speculate. What happened to the boy who, at 14, knew things that others don't learn in decades? Some believe Marshall is still active, just continuing his activities under a different name, with different methods. Others think he completely gave up business life and is living a normal teenager's life. But there's a third possibility, perhaps the most interesting, that Marshall never stopped being special. Maybe he's still there, somewhere in the background, doing things we don't even know about yet. Marshall Pike's story, however incredible, contains important lessons. It shows that abilities and talent can manifest in forms we don't expect, that there are people who think completely differently and see the world differently. But perhaps the most important lesson is that special abilities come with responsibility. Marshall understood this at 14 and acted accordingly. Marshall's case raises serious questions in the scientific world too. If there really are people who naturally possess extraordinary business instincts, then this means our previous ideas about success and talent might not be complete. Dr. Santos and several other researchers have begun studying cases where young people show extraordinary abilities in specific areas. Marshall's case might be the beginning of a completely new scientific direction. What happens to the systems Marshall built? They continue to function, develop, and create new business opportunities. Some speculate that these systems will eventually become so intelligent that they'll be capable of creating new ventures independently. This is an exciting but also alarming thought. What happens if an artificial intelligence created by a 14-year-old child becomes smarter than its creator? Marshall Pike's legacy lives on today. The business strategies and methods he applied have become integrated into modern entrepreneurial thinking. Young entrepreneurs who never heard of Marshall still use solutions he developed. This is perhaps the greatest evidence that Marshall was truly special. His impact survived his personal withdrawal and continues to shape the world we live in. The Pike family still lives in California today, but they live as if Marshall had never been famous. Linda Pike returned to teaching. Robert Pike continues as a mechanic. And Marshall? Marshall Pike is 17 years old and allegedly living a completely normal high school life. But those who know his story know that nothing is what it seems in Marshall Pike's life. As I write these words, a strange thought crosses my mind. What if Marshall Pike's story isn't over yet? What if everything we've seen so far was just the prelude to something even bigger? Last night, I received an anonymous email. It only said, "The story continues. Watch for the signs." The sender's name? MP. Maybe it's just a joke. Maybe someone who read the articles about Marshall Pike. But maybe